So I lived in different places. I'm originally from Europe. And about 7 years ago, I moved to LA to study, not to become an actress. And then I moved here quite recently. And I noticed in LA, I had a great time and I moved up the vibrational scale. And in the beginning, I didn't have very good things happening here. And there was challenging. But as time passed, things got better in my life experience. But I had to focus really hard to keep them that way vibrationally in order to keep a certain standard of life, of living. And, I couldn't really afford to get out of the vortex for very long before bad things began to happen.
What you're describing is what a lot of people in this room or who have been doing this work are feeling. We're only going to interrupt briefly, so hold your place. And that's the reason that we are now speaking a lot about getting out ahead of it, because while you can hold yourself by focus, there's enough resistance in that it's hard work. It's too hard of work. And now you know what you know. You see, now you know that it's about vibration, and now you know you can affect the way you feel. So now you've shown yourself that you are capable of controlling your vibrational frequency, and now we're talking about the easiest way to do it.
Yes. So I'm wondering, when I moved here, things got so much simpler. My standard of living just increased in a month, got a better car, met super nice people and everything. And I feel like it's so much easier for me to keep a certain kind of life here than it was over there. And I watch other people too, like everyone I meet here kind of has a good life pretty much. They have a certain standard of living. They're not struggling. They're not in survival mode. But in LA, everyone was pretty much struggling. And I'm wondering, is the energy in the place that different that it affects, or is it purely vibrational? Like, I'm very confused on why it is so different in different places.
Well, yes, it's different, and you can see the manifestations of the differences, but the reason for the manifestational differences that you can see is about vibration, and it's about the balance of desire versus belief. And so a lot of people, they come from around the world to go there to satisfy dreams that they're not up to speed with. And so there's a bigger gap, doesn't have to be, but what you're talking about is a bigger collective gap between what is desired and what is observed. And so people just have a little rougher ride. It doesn't have to be that way. But there's another factor that is more important, and that is you're there, you're launching your rockets, you are doing your best to tune in, and you are often in the receiving mode, even though you might not have been acknowledging it as that, but you're often in the receiving mode and received the impulse. In other words, your inner being said, follow me, and you followed your inner being here. You followed your inner being to the path of least resistance. And so let's not assign different geographic places or even different energetic places as more or less resistant, because it's all about you and what you're doing, because you could be anywhere and feel better about it.
Yeah, and that's how I felt, because here I don't really know too much people here, so it's just easier for me to focus into that place and actually be intentional about what I'm creating.
So you could tell that story a little differently. You could say, when I was there, I had more people who were suffering, and I was giving more of my attention to those suffering people, and so things didn't go as well for me. Then I moved to a place where I didn't know so many people, so I did much less of that. I did more following of my inner being, and I feel way better. That's the story. That's the story.
Yeah.
But you see, what you are demonstrating here is what most humans do. Most humans don't tell the vibrational version. They tell the manifested physical version. And so then they come to erroneous conclusions about one city versus another, which you got to admit is accurate in one way, but it's not telling the deep story. It's not telling the story that you can do anything about. That story says you can never go there and feel as good as you feel here. That's a flawed premise. And it makes us want to tell you this story about what so much of the physical world does is they divide everything into piles. So there's the Los Angeles pile, and there's the Atlanta pile, and there's this political party and this religious party, and everything's in a pile, because instead of talking about energy, they're talking about the results of the way people have flowed the energy. So they're looking at the results, they're looking at the effect, not the cause. When you're looking at the vibration, now you're out ahead of it. When you're looking at the manifestation of the vibration, now you're not out ahead of it. Now you're just regurgitating it and sorting it into piles and calling them good piles and bad piles and confusing yourself along the way. So we want to take all those piles that include people who love dogs, people who don't, cat lovers versus dog lovers. You know the piles. There's a lot of them. Drive you nuts if you begin to contemplate. And we just want you to realize there's really just two piles. That's all. The under the influence of source pile in this moment, and the not under the influence of source pile, under the influence of something other than source pile. And each of those piles, no matter what the previous label was, has both of those in it. In every political party, there are those under the influence of source and those not. And in every pile of humanity, there are those who are approaching life vibrationally, following the resources of their inner being, or those who are struggling and doing it the hard way. And when you think about it, a lot of religious guidance has set you off on a flawed-footed premise. And it goes something like this. You are flawed as you are. There's something wrong with you. And you are here to get over that. And most religions say, and we'll show you the way. But in the acknowledging you as flawed or sinning or whatever, they're under the wrong influence, and so they really don't have anything to offer you. A lot of people these days are sort of shying away from the norms because they're beginning to discover that they too can tap in to source energy. You don't need someone else proclaiming your rightness or your wrongness. You can feel your alignment or not in the moment once you understand how it all works. We really like having these conversations, and we know that sometimes you might be listening here, especially if you're new to this conversation or to this program or this way of offering it, and you might just think that Esther is really sure of what she's saying because she doesn't deviate and there are no contradictions in it. And we like to say there's not a shred of evidence to the contrary of it because it is law-based. But still, you might just think she's good at her presentation. But when you resonate with the awareness that there's that larger part of you who is aware of you and listening to you, who's walking with you and calling you, and you manage to, from a place of a higher vibration, maybe you were just dancing and listening to music and you got there, or maybe you were meditating and quieted your thoughts and you got there, or maybe you just moved to another city and felt happier and you got there. Doesn't matter how you got there. At a place of higher vibration, you received an impulse and followed it and saw the big payoff in following it, and then you get it, because words don't teach. It's only life experience that teaches.